Welcome to Shift, a college admissions ACT and SAT podcast for a changing world. I'm Tyler, the founder of Achievable, and we have an affordable ACT course that includes everything you need to ace your ACT tests. A full textbook, tons of ACT questions backed by our memory enhancing algorithm, a built in study planner, and full length practice exams. You can get a free trial at achievable.me, and if you like it, the code podcast gets you 10% off at checkout. And if you have a question or topic you'd like us to discuss in a future episode, please contact me, Tyler at achievable.me, with the subject line podcast topic. Now, let's get started. Today, we've got Robert Franklin from Admission Auto with us. Robert, I'd love if you could just give a little bit about your background and about your company.
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, my name is Robert Franklin. I'm a college consultant at Admission Auto, as well as a writer and a freelance editor. I am from Atlanta, Georgia, originally. I live in New York today. Yeah.
Great. So today we're going to be talking about TikTok college admissions essay trends, which I think is a super funny topic, and also, frankly, one that I imagine is rife with bad advice, or I feel like there's good and bad ways to use this advice, right? So, let's start with like just what are the trends, right? Like because I imagine not everybody who's listening is on TikTok a ton. So what are these trends? Like what are the big things like high level?
Yeah, I mean, so the two kind of main trends that I've been seeing, um, as I like much of the country kind of become obsessed with TikTok, is first people saying basically reading either the opening or the entirety of the essay that got them into X school. So usually these are titled, here's the Common App essay that got me into Yale. And then people proceed to read their essay. And then the second trend that I'd love to talk about are people ostensibly like experts or maybe current students of some of these schools who make what not to write about as TikToks. And then they just
Yeah.
list off topics that they basically think are kind of trite, overused, uninteresting topics about which to write your essays. And I do think, I mean, you know, none of my students have yet mentioned a TikTok as something that they're kind of incorporating into their application calculus. But I think inevitably they're probably seeing these videos, and it's
Mhm.
coloring kind of their how they think about the whole process.
Right. Well, and I mean that's maybe a good place to start is like so what is it that makes an essay actually good and actually work from an admissions point of view, right? And then maybe we tie that to what works for them may not work for you, right? I think that's kind of the big thing.
No, totally. I mean, okay. So admissions committees, their job is to basically fill the class with people who they believe are bound for future success. So they want to get, a group of students with, generally speaking, if it's a liberal arts college, kind of an array of different interests from different backgrounds, but who are united by the fact that they have excelled in high school in
Hmm.
whatever their passions are and whatever the classes were. And as a result of both that and their sort of personal attributes, they seem like a good bet in terms of someone who's bound for future success. So you basically should think of your college
Right.
application as like a pitch. You're a brand, and you're trying to distill the most compelling and sort of cohesive story about yourself to tell college admissions officers.
Right. And so, I mean, that's where the first sort of that's the first thing that falls down for me with the TikTok trends, right? Is like what these people are writing about is usually something that's related to their life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for this, it's kind of helpful maybe um, to mention. I would argue slash from my research seems to be the OG viral application essay TikTok, which was from this student named Abigail Mack a couple years back. In the opening letter, or she's now a student at Harvard. Um, And
Right, naturally.
naturally, so the opening line of her essay is "I hate the letter S." Continues of the 1,060 or the 100,064 164,777 words with S. I only grapple with one. To condemn an entire letter because of its use 0.0006% of the time sounds statistically absurd, but that one case changed 100% of my life. I used to have two parents, but now I have one, and the S in parents isn't going anywhere. So that was kind of a TikTok that maybe 2-3 years ago went super viral, in part because it has this really compelling hook. It doesn't sound like most college essays. It's a surprising opening. You're immediately grabbed and kind of curious to hear more. And
Yeah, even just to be like, what are you even getting on about, right? Like,
yeah, there's like a sort of element of just mystery of like, okay, well, let's see where this goes. Um,
mhm.
And so, I mean, obviously we won't read the whole essay, but she basically uses this like very grabby open to kind of work into this meditation on how a word as common and like quotidian as parents, which you probably read without thinking about every single day, or hear in, passing conversation, every time that word was sort of uttered after her mother died at age 12, it became this kind of like daily trigger. So she used it as this way in to talk about one of the defining moments of her life or events of her life, which was losing her mom. But the essay doesn't stop there. Um, so I think had it stopped there, it would have been potentially a little bit too kind of like doom and gloom, to be a really impactful essay. But she continues to show basically how um, the desire to kind of get away from this tragedy led her to really throw herself into a bunch of different activities, trying to stay busy all the time. And then through that period, as she kind of began to heal, to discovering some real passions and being able to kind of funnel what could have been the great tragedy of her life, funnel that energy into a love for politics and theater, essentially.
Right. And so, like, even just like this is a good first example because you can even just break it down, just like what should you take away from it, what should you not take away from it. You should probably not take away the whole story because unless your parent died, like it doesn't make any sense, right? But the thing you should take away from it is like she didn't just open the essay with, it was a really sad day on, May 12th, whatever, when my mother died. Like she tied it to something, and she also made it, like you said, like a hook, like it was interesting and unique, right? And that's like those are the lessons to take away from it, right? And then the other thing you said where it's like, okay, so then if you just talk about this bad thing that happened, that's not necessarily great by itself, right? You really need to also like incorporate it into sort of the future growth and goals and like the things that they want to invest in, right? Like you said, which is the idea that like you're going to be an important person someday, or that you're going to do things that make the school look good, or whatever it is.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, I mean, you have to kind of draw out the crucial elements of your personality and character, that are things the college wants to be associated with and things that they want in their freshman class. And so overly focusing on like a singular event, whether that's like a great triumph or a tragedy, um, is not enough. You have to kind of tie that back into the person you have become and how you have sort of like taken the aftermath of whatever that event is, and used it to really kind of fortify your personality. So I think, something that she does incredibly well, and why I think she even got a likely letter from Harvard, is she evidences her, she, first of all, is able to kind of incorporate some of the impressive experiences she's had working on political campaigns, um, etc. And is able to kind of incorporate some of those like extracurricular and resume items, but in this way where it illustrates that she like took what could have completely derailed someone's life and turned that into a sort of burning energy to find other things that she was passionate about. So it evidences a resilience and a sort of creativity in the way that she approaches her life. But she, so that's all kind of in the content of what she's saying. But in the style or the execution, she took a real risk and did something that is stylistically distinct, which is tough to do.
It's also it's also like these people are reading, call it 40,000 admissions essays divided by how many readers they have. But they're probably at least reading each like a couple thousand, right? So, it's kind of hard to like stand out from the crowd. And I wonder how many like cringy ones they get where like people are trying to do something like that and it doesn't work. But,
Yeah. I mean, I almost think that that's like the other big lesson from this one is don't think that the gimmick is enough. So like
yeah, yeah.
your essay can't just be a cute, distinctive hook or something that feels like overly kind of zany and whimsical. Um, while that might grab their attention from the first line, if it doesn't then um, kind of dial up to a more comprehensive, meaningful meditation on the person you are today, it's likely to catch their attention in the wrong way. So I think that you could definitely watch, especially because of just the way that TikTok is set up, where I think videos at this point can be up to 60 seconds. She reads basically the section that I read before, like the first paragraph, in one TikTok. So if you just watch that, you might be like, okay, the lesson is I need to do something that's just like completely unexpected because they're reading a ton of essays. I just want to like get my foot in the door. Um, and I would advise students against having an essay whose quality is kind of all in the gimmick. They need to think about, yeah, what's the real story they're telling? What's the kind of heart of it?
Yeah, I think it's a good lesson. Is there like another maybe TikTok trend that you like, another one that's distinct that you want to share?
I mean, so I do want to talk about the videos where students, or I guess some are probably made by admissions consultants, basically list off things that you should not talk about based on what they consider to be um, kind of cringe or overly done. So I just watched one where the things that they included. I think it was part 10 to be fair. So I'm sure in across 10 parts they basically listed every single subject out there. But in part 10,
Right.
he forbade people from speaking about musical performances, sports injuries, tragedy. Quite a big topic to strike off the list. Or a narrative version of your resume, like listing off your resume. The only one I would agree with there is that last one, which that is definitely something I've seen. It's never great. Basically
Right.
taking all of your experiences, all of your extracurriculars, and just finding like writing out a prose description of them is certainly not what a personal statement is supposed to be.
Well, I also think that I don't know, the other one that I agreed with, I'm curious whether you think this is true or not, is the sports injury one. I feel like that one does get used a fair amount.
Well, when I was applying to college, at this point, like over 10 years ago, there was this sort of cliche of the mission trip essay of,
Oh, yeah, yeah. And then I went to Ecuador and built houses. Yeah.
yeah, that kind of, yeah, which I mean, both was trite and also can like easily work its way into these kind of like, um, just politically dangerous territory. Um, but I think like My honest response to that is yes, sure, it is better to pick a distinctive topic, but I have seen students pull off a very common topic um beautifully and get into top colleges. And so it's
Mhm.
essentially just like, if you're going to pick a more common topic, there's a kind of higher bar, both in terms of the content, so how you're sort of tying your sports injury into the qualities that make you you and make you a great admit, as well as the execution. So if you're going to, just like, if I'm a fiction writer, if I'm writing a short story, I don't want to mimic existing writers. I want to, if I'm picking like a kind of common topic, uh, so say I'm writing like a marriage plot. I'm writing like a um, boy meets girl, they fall in love. I want to subvert the expectations of the genre. Like, I want to change something and make it
Mhm.
stylistically distinct. Otherwise, what's the value? And so, by the same token, like, if you are writing a sports injury essay along with many, many, many other people, um, think about ways in which you could kind of subvert that form. Um, yeah,
Right. Well, I also think the other thing too is like at the end of the day, if it actually is like really important to you, then like just really just tie it to your own personal story. No admissions officer is ever going to be upset that you like told the most important story to you.
yeah, precisely. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's a great point. I also think, that was just one of many videos of this kind. I've seen ones that um take the perspective that, like, the kind of new in vogue but overdone essays are like COVID difficulties, mental health, social justice, like post 2020. Um, and again, like, I would say, I've had students who've been massively successful writing about those things. And
Right.
it is precisely what you said. Like, if it truly is one of the kind of defining um, events or periods of your life, and you can very tactically show how that sort of led to, um, how you took that experience and sort of like fed it back into your own development, whether that's through, you realized a passion for climate justice, um,
Mhm.
because you watched a film or something, and then you started the sustainability club at your high school, and you're actively working to get to kind of carbon neutral status on campus, and you can point to the steps you've taken, the progress you've made. Um, that's a super meaningful essay, and that's not something, um, in terms of, most students, I hope, can say that they are concerned about climate change, but not every student can say, I started our campus like composting um,
Initiative, yeah.
initiative. Like, very few people can actually use that to kind of point to specific actions they've taken and a sort of lasting impact they will have had on their high school.
Yeah. I think that is the conclusion that I wanted to bring up too, but you are already on it, which is like basically these essays should hopefully be tying to something that you did,
Yeah,
right? It should be like, and then I did something about it. Like that's the ideal situation. Not everyone gets to do that, right? But I think that it's much more impactful to take sort of for lack of a better word, like a more common topic and then go out and actually like do something about it than to just write about a common topic.
yeah, completely. Complete.
So then I'm curious, do you have any more do you have like a third TikTok trend to dissect here? Or do you feel like we've got enough with two?
I would say, I mean, a third one that I've noticed
Mhm.
is this sort of like man on the street interview. Usually, students who are current students at, XYZ college, going around to peers and asking what they wrote their essays about. Um, which is kind of it's an interesting one because we don't obviously get to see the execution. So it's like I was just watching one. I think it took place. I mean, it was at Yale, where she was quickly kind of asking different students what they wrote their Common App essay about. Someone was like, "Oh, I wrote about my like terrible experience working at like a meatball shop in high school." Somebody else wrote about, um, I can't remember the specific things, but they, I would say like what was kind of interesting is at least the way they described their own essays, for the most part, sounded like very singular topics. Um, but I'm sure if we were to actually read those essays, they followed certain kind of key narrative arcs of the student who hated his job working at this like Italian meatball shop. I'm sure we open in scene, we see like what's so horrible about this job, and he, I would imagine, spun that into a sort of meditation about how he endured that or what it taught him and how he then brought those qualities to other aspects of his life. So we still get a kind of hero's journey, even if in his mind the essay is about this like annoying work experience that he had in high school. No, it's a hardship essay. It's about something that was difficult, that he learned from, that he grew from, and what is great about it, or a sort of like extra to that, is that it's a really distinctive setting that we maybe haven't seen inside of yet, or haven't read 1,000 essays on.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that is um it's important. Maybe the lesson from this is it's important to not read too much into the specifics of these individual essays, right? Like you said, there's usually probably a lot that's left unsaid on the TikTok. TikToks are very short. And then also, again, it's like so much of what worked for whatever they were doing was related to their own life.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, I think students should think think critically about their experiences, about the 3 to 5 topics they're sort of considering, and they should do a sort of two-pronged calculus. One of what is going to most effectively highlight the traits that I want to highlight in this
Mhm.
essay, the traits that are that kind of define me, as well as like make me a really compelling admin. So which of these stories best tells that? And then I think as like a kind of secular, or secondary rather, um, a secondary consideration should be distinctiveness, and trying to have something um, that's going to kind of jump out at a reader.
Yeah. And maybe like that distinctiveness is kind of how you're telling the story, or maybe it's like what happens afterwards, right? But it's got to be something that makes it a little bit more interesting and unique to you, hopefully. That's the goal.
That's the goal. Yeah, very few students will have um, a truly singular story. That almost never happens. I had one student. I do alumni interviews, and I did have one student who was like the youngest person to fly solo around the world or something. And it was like, yeah, okay, so
Okay.
you have you have a singular story. No one else can say that. So, like, yeah, talk about that. But most students will have the same topic as potentially hundreds of other people. So you have to find other ways to kind of um, tell it in a singular way.
Yeah, that's great. Any kind of concluding thoughts on this topic?
No, I think we got it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been Shift, a college admissions podcast for a changing world, hosted by Tyler from Achievable with Rob from Admissionado. And Achievable has a free trial of our ACT course that you can get by going to achievable.me. And if you like the ACT course, use the code podcast to get 10% off at checkout.